So, first of all, what is the Safer Streets campaign?
The Safer Streets campaign is all around how we can make the streets safer for women. So last summer, after I came into office, I did a survey and spoke to women and girls across the region, asking kind of where they felt unsafe, where they felt safe, any kind of things that might help them feel safer. And we also did some joint work with Liverpool City Council as part of a bid to get secure some funding for additional work. So as part of the Safer Streets campaign, we have got bystander training for individuals. One of the issues that was raised quite a lot was transport hubs and transport networks. So the campaign is very much targeted at making those safer. So we're working with drivers and individuals on the network around bystander training. We're doing education and training in schools to tackle things like misogyny. But a big part of this also was around visibility. A lot of the women and particularly some of the students were telling us that they wanted more visibility from uniformed officers and somebody who can provide some of that reassurance as they are travelling to and from the city centre. So that's what the latest stage of the campaign is all about.
Okay, that sounds great. So how important is it to get student feedback? Is it sort of flexible, the campaign at all? Is a change is being made as you're getting feedback, or is it just sort of, has it not been enough time yet?
I think it's only just started, and I think the additional funding that we've got for some of that increased visibility around PCSOs, for example, is also being supported by other bits. So, for example, we've got specials, and it's also supported by what we call the kind of nighttime operation, where we already have lots of police activity going on, particularly in the city centre, around the kind of nighttime economy. So I think there's always an ability to kind of flex and grow depending on what issues are reported on the night. Some of the conversations that I know the officers and PCSOs are having with students as they're on the 699, for example. So they'll take some of that feedback around where they want to see that visibility and respond to what they're kind of raising concerns about. So absolutely, there'll be flexibility to make sure we're targeting those right areas.
That's really good, because I was sort of wondering, I guess it must be with the feedback you get, you'll sort of want to adjust it based on how, because I guess every area is different for sure. So about $250,000 has been spent on it, is that right? $750,000, is that right?
I think that's for the whole campaign. So I think we got some funding from the Home Office, which was to support the whole broad of the campaign. So there's a specific amount that has been put aside for the officer time that we're investing in. But as I say, it's being supported by other elements as well. So our specials, for example, who are volunteer constables, they're out and about supporting it. So it's very much an additional kind of targeted resource, but we're linking it into other parts of existing resource as well.
Okay, so given how many stabbings and so much violence there has been recently, has definitely been on the rise, do you think that this will definitely be successful in trying to decrease that? Do you think that that will, not just necessarily for women, but just for the general public anyway?
I think if we're really going to get a handle on some of the issues that we've seen around knife crime and serious violence, we have to look at a whole system approach. So absolutely, that visibility, and particularly from policing, having them out, being in those kind of key target areas. I was just out this lunchtime at one of the train stations in the city centre where they had a knife arch out, for example, working with British Transport Police. So absolutely, I think we want that visibility and that proactive response from the police to try and spot people who might be tempted to carry a weapon, for example. But actually, if we're really going to tackle it, we also have to invest in some of the prevention work, which we're also doing, for example, through the Violence Reduction Partnership. We're investing in kind of, education in schools. We're looking at identifying young people who might be vulnerable to getting exploited into crime. How are we engaging with them to offer a better way of life with maybe skills training or tackling some of their mental health or other issues that they might be dealing with? So it's really about looking at it in the round, so that we're looking at that kind of long-term public health approach to stop anybody feeling like they want to carry a knife in the first place.
So going on to sort of, if perhaps a young person does find themselves caught up in this sort of violence or this way of carrying weapons around, is the solution more punishment based, or would you say that you try and incorporate rehabilitation for these young people as well?
I think it's absolutely got to be about that long-term public health approach. Absolutely, you know, we take it very seriously. The police take it very seriously. We have seen a number of really positive cases go through the courts where actually people have, you know, caused serious harm, and that should be dealt with properly, and people should face penalties for that. You know, we've seen the increase in terms of what weapons people might be holding on to. You know, that work is taken very, very seriously. But it is important that we recognise that vulnerability, and if we really want to get a tackle on it, a handle on it, we have to acknowledge that people will be coming from very chaotic lives. They'll be coming from very difficult places, and a lot of these young people don't want to be involved in this kind of activity. They want to live a better life, but they need support from us and agencies to do that. So we absolutely need to do both. It needs to be both ends of the spectrum, a robust response, particularly when there's been serious harm, but a real focus on getting upstream and trying to stop those people who might be on the fringes ever getting to that point.
So do you actually think that more police officers will make women feel safer, given that Sarah Everard was actually murdered by one? I know that a lot of people that I, for example, have spoken to don't necessarily feel safer, but perhaps more intimidated by more police officers.
I absolutely recognise that there will be women who feel like that, and legitimately so with what we saw. I understand why that anxiety will be there. But actually, when we went out and spoke to students in particular, and when we spoke to women across the board, so both within my survey, but also when the focus groups were done with students, they were saying we want that visibility. You know, a lot of people do feel reassured, particularly if it's female police officers, you know, who are able to offer that kind of real support and visible reassurance. You know, the vast majority of people, I think, do have that. But I do acknowledge that for some people, there is still work to be done, which, again, I know the police are very alive to, and the Chief Constable is working to try and reassure people that, you know, Merseyside police officers are good, you know, committed individuals, and it's not something that we'd see reflected on Merseyside.
Perfect. So, are there more? Is there? So sorry if you've already answered this. You might have done. Was it just for clarity? Was it just visible presence on transport hubs, or was it more on the streets in general as well?
The focus of the Safer Streets campaign has been around the transport hubs, because that was what women told us was their biggest concern. I think because, for example, if you look at the city centre, particularly in the night time, we have quite a strong police presence there already, and as well as working with our, you know, other partners around security and other people, there's a lot of resource already there. And actually, I think it's quite often when you are then starting to make your way home, for example, at the end of a night, you might be moving to the bus shelters or the train stations, or starting to go and find a taxi, for example. That's when sometimes the crowds get quieter and there's less of that visibility. So that's why we've really focused on that, because that is ultimately what women were telling us was where they were feeling most unsafe. And so as well as the kind of visibility, we've also got that increased CCTV and more of that kind of practical infrastructure as well. So people feel like there's a backup there, and there's, you know, people can't get away with anything because there's lots of kind of visibility and a reassurance. So
you mentioned that there were lots of more officers and protection on the streets, and specifically in the city centre. Has this increased since? So I'm just aware that we're coming up to Ava White's the anniversary of her death last year. So I'm just wondering, has that increased since you know, that was such a pivotal moment, I think, for a lot of people. So I'm just wondering if police presence in the city centre specifically and on the streets have increased since that tragedy.
I think there's always been a very strong police presence in the city centre by the nature of some of the areas that they've seen some challenges. When I met with some of the teams last week, they were telling me about this approach they're taking, where they're looking at some of the key hotspots. So some of those areas where we've seen those kind of increase and those particular challenges around violence or high levels of crime. And they're really focusing on trying to get that visibility into those areas. So I think what they're trying to do is recognise that there are certain areas that probably need that that visibility more, and that's going to have the biggest impact on reducing some of that crime. So I think it's about using the resources in a really smart way, because we need more officers. You know, we're still 465 short of where we were, you know, over 10 years ago. So I think we're still going to have a challenge around having the officers that we actually want and need. But I think what they're trying to do is make sure they're really targeting them in the right places where we see some of those particular challenges, and responding to what the concerns of the public are as well.
So with that being said, do you think that schemes like these will possibly bring comfort to bereaved families, or families that maybe have been family members of victims in the past, or victims themselves even? Do you think that schemes like these will bring comfort to them?
I mean, I wouldn't want to speak for them and try and put words in their mouth, but certainly when I've had conversations with a number of parents and you know, particularly parents, but families who have lost loved ones, there is this real kind of innate desire to want to stop it from happening again to anybody else. You know, it's a huge amount of courage, and some of the work that these families have done, you know, in the kind of memory of people they've lost is tremendous. But there is that overarching message that absolutely they want us to take it seriously. They want to try and make sure that this doesn't happen again to anybody else. And we really work with them and try and listen to them in terms of where they feel that we can make the best impact. So absolutely, I'm hopeful that this will give them some reassurance that we are taking it very seriously.
That's amazing, thank you. And I was just going, so I was listening to you on BBC Radio Merseyside yesterday, on Tuesday even, sorry, and you said that pushing policing cost increases on cash-strapped bill payers is wrong. I just wanted to, is it okay if you could expand on that? I just wanted to gauge that a little bit better.
One of the ways, so the ways that Merseyside Police is funding, and the funding that comes through my office, is we get a grant from the Home Office, and then we also collect a precept through the council tax, so what local taxpayers will pay. What the government is looking to do, and we're still going to work through the detail because obviously the budget's come out today and I've not seen the detail of it yet, but what there is a temptation for governments to do is to, if public services like policing are looking for more funding and need, you know, as I say, we are cash strapped, we need more investment, they will say to people like me, well, you could increase the council tax that local people are paying. The issue I have with that is that the way that council tax is done is not very progressive, and it's not done fairly and in proportion to what people actually earn and what they have. And so what it means is that somewhere like Merseyside, for example, we have quite a low council tax base, and the money that we get from those council taxpayers is much lower than what you might get, say, in other parts of the country who have more people who are likely to be able to pay more council tax, and they will get more money back from that. Given the pressures, and we know the cost of living crisis and the pressures that people are under, my concern is if we keep pushing that burden onto local taxpayers, we're pushing onto people who ultimately are going to struggle to pay that. And that, for me, isn't a sustainable way to fund what should be essential public services like policing, like councils, like your fire service.
That was perfect, thank you. And just one final thing, what message do you have for victims of misogyny and harassment on the streets and transport, etc.? What message do you have for those people?
My message would be that this is not something you have to put up with. This is something that we take very seriously. It's something that we are working very hard to tackle in terms of some of the education and the work we're doing to really challenge what people think about when they have gender stereotypes and misogyny, and the language that can be used, particularly at a young age. So we're doing lots of proactive work, but I would just encourage women to come forward and report it, because we absolutely take it very seriously. There's a new app called the Street Safe app, or the online website called Street Safe, where if people are worried that maybe it doesn't quite fall into the category of a crime and they don't want to report to the police, they can still log it as something that happened, and then we will be able to respond and recognise it as an area that needs some action, either because of CCTV or because of a police presence. So, you know, it's absolutely something that women shouldn't have to put up with. I am totally committed to trying and stamping out in every way I can, and we'll continue to do that work as much as possible.
That's incredible. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
No, that sounds good.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you. And no problem. And take care.
Thanks very much.